Hi, my name is Trevor Green. Welcome to my action research presentation. My project is called Hoy es viernes, ponles un video, the use of music videos in the foreign language classroom to promote vocabulary and students' perceptions. The title, Hoy es viernes, ponles un video, is a line from a Señor Woolley song, non-authentic music, which was not used for my project, but a partially ironic title that I realized early on in my teaching career that music videos had a unique potential to engage students. I would notice that their eyes would be focused on the screen, their mouths would be closed, they would even put their phones away for a couple of minutes to look at this music video. If not engaged, at least interacting with this music video. I also had noticed that this was able to form a personal connection with students. Students stopped me after class to tell me about their other favorite Ozuna song. And because of this background of always using music videos throughout my classes and my musical background, as well as my classes through SOU, SLI, and one of my classes was Dr. Tom's, where in his second language acquisition course, I read about the research of Michael Long talking about negotiation of meaning, and the research of Bill Van Patten, where he talked about form-focused instruction. I wanted to use these music videos in a more pedagogically systematic way, rather than just throwing them on the screen because it was Friday to get students' attention. So I came up with these following research questions. Number one, what is the effect of music videos on vocabulary acquisition? Number two, what are students' perceptions of music video use in the Spanish language classroom to promote vocabulary acquisition? And number three, what are students' perception of using authentic music versus non-authentic music in a Spanish language classroom? The importance of this study. That third point is one that's very important to me, to inform me about my students' perception of music videos in both their efficacy in promoting vocabulary acquisition, and also students' perception about culturally authentic, non-culturally authentic music. It's easy to do an informal poll and ask students what they think about things, but you always get the loudest students voicing their negative opinions or their positive opinions, so I wanted to pull the opinions of everyone. Also, I would like to add to the current field of SLA research regarding music and vocabulary acquisition, and I think that my research may also lend support for using these pop music videos in Spanish, and also as a part of the vocabulary acquisition process in the foreign language classroom. A couple terms before we get started. Vocabulary knowledge scale. This was a means of measuring students' vocabulary knowledge created in 1993 by Parkbat and Wesch, and it blends self-reportive receptive knowledge of words with the supplying of L1 equivalents and making sentences with tested words. This was how I quantified students' vocabulary knowledge during the study. Authentic text, another word. It is a text created to fulfill a social purpose in the language community with which it was intended. The authentic text used in my study are music videos from Spain, from Colombia, from Argentina. These authentic texts stand in contrast to non-authentic texts, which are texts created by teachers to fulfill a specific pedagogical purpose. Starting with the literature review. The literature review was broken down into music and language learning, music and vocabulary acquisition and the vocabulary knowledge scale, and students' perceptions of non-authentic and authentic music in the foreign language classroom. For the first section, a lot of studies confirm music's role as a part of the learning process in general. Studies from the fields of sociology, cognitive science, first language acquisition research, and second language acquisition research. One such study in the field of cognitive science from 2016 found a positive correlation between music and working memory. This was a digit span test in which participants had to enter random strings of numbers on a keypad. Over the course of 3 modes, visual, audio-visual, and audio, musicians outperformed non-musicians. This was true even when task complexity was increased. So this lends support for musicians having better working memory, important in the language acquisition process. Another study found a connection between production and perception skills with Polish teenagers learning English. This study from 2009 found that they concluded that musical aptitude was not only a predictor, but a determinant of success in a foreign language classroom, with production skills in music being connected to production skills in a second language. Perception skills likewise in music being connected to perception skills in a foreign language. Also, in a study from 2016 with Romanian teenagers learning French, students listening to songs and at the beginning of class, they were reporting high language anxiety, found their language anxiety levels decreasing after listening to the songs. This was not true for students with reporting middle level language anxiety or lower level language anxiety, but it could decrease the high anxiety of language anxiety found in some of these students. For music and vocabulary acquisition, in a review from 2019, DeGray found that music supports vocabulary acquisition, writing fluency, listening comprehension, and phonetic skills. To this list, I would also add another item, language play. Language play is creating with language unburdened by the physical realities. Like in poetry or literature, music allows a space where linguistic possibilities can be explored without depending on physical reality. In another study from 2014, specifically vocal pop songs that were studied in class had a mixed effect on vocabulary acquisition. In the short term, they had a negative effect for a lot of participants. A negative to mixed effect. However, this effect did not bear out in the long term. Any negative benefits were solely in the short term. So, De Groot and Smedinga titled their study in all caps, "Let the Music Play." On the third study listed here, another study found mixed support. This study from 2010 found 2 out of the 3 songs were negative consequences for the musical group through song-focused instruction. However, students did experience the song stuck in my head phenomenon where repetitions of the song would play in their mind without their control. Looking more at vocabulary acquisition and the specific study design, vocabulary knowledge is one area that can be quantified in ways that other language knowledge cannot. Form-focused instruction, specifically isolated or integrated vocabulary instruction, led to both short-term and long-term vocabulary retention, rather than just incidental exposure alone. Rather than having my students experience incidental exposure of these vocabulary terms, I decided to create my study with both isolated and integrated vocabulary instruction. On the third study, there's one study from 2013 by Yi and Sun, there's another from 2002 by Fuentes, but both studies agreed that giving learners opportunities for negotiation of meaning is an effective way to promote that vocabulary acquisition. In this particular study, Chinese learners of English who were given opportunities for negotiation of meaning not only had higher vocabulary retention, but they were also available to gain greater levels of comprehensible input through these opportunities. Another guiding factor for me creating this study is that Marzipan and Hatipur in 2014 said that breadth and depth of vocabulary knowledge is virtually inseparable. They found that breadth and depth were closely related, virtually inseparable, so instead of focusing on the vast quantity of terms I could teach through the music videos used and songs used in this intervention, I decided to focus on a limited number of terms, 10 specific terms per unit, which were planned that the students would not have encountered in their Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 classes before. To measure these terms and their growth over time throughout the at the end of the intervention, the vocabulary knowledge scale was used. In 2012 review, Stewart found the vocabulary knowledge scale to be highly reliable, except when using loanwords from another language. Because of this, I did not use any loanwords with the study, albeit useful, they would interfere with the vocabulary knowledge skills results. It is true that a highly complex process, such as the mastery of any lexical item, cannot be perfectly broken down into 5 distinct phases, but the vocabulary knowledge skill was found to be highly reliable by Stewart, which is why I used it in this study. Students' perception of music use in a foreign language classroom. This was one area that I did not find a lot of studies, and I thought that the relative scarcity of studies in this area meant that my study could contribute to this field. In one such study from Turkey in 2011, all 56 participants in Yale-based study perceived musical activities as beneficial for their learning and improving their motivation to learn new words and helping to forge a positive classroom environment. Another such study in 2019, using pop songs and Slovak university students. This specific study used some Spanish language pop songs, specifically some of the musical artists that am using with my study, Nicky Jam, and These songs for these Slovak university students evoke positive emotions. It was also one of the favorite class activities of these subjects. My specific study took place in Algona, Iowa, where I teach at the public high school in Algona, Iowa. It is a rural town in northwest Iowa with 5,500 people. Our enrollment last year was 431 students, the vast majority of whom identify as white, and a third qualify for free and reduced lunch. In total, there were 41 participants across 2 classes of Spanish. These were Spanish 3 students. The vast majority of them, 40 of them, were students that I had taught last year in Spanish 2, and they were in 2 classes. The control group was my 5th period class, 22 students who received instruction using non-authentic music videos. These were videos from SeniorWoolly.com, created by James Woolridge, the music and music videos, as well as the pedagogical activities, the accompanying teaching activities for each unit. For the experimental group, 19 students from my 6th period class were this group, and they received instruction with authentic music videos from Colombia and Spain and Argentina. This study took place over 8 weeks. The intervention lasted from the end of September to the beginning of December. Before and after the intervention, there was a pre-survey and a post-survey, which contained 8 Likert scale items as well as 5 open-ended questions. The vocabulary knowledge skills test was only administered at the end of the intervention. Throughout the duration of the intervention, I kept a teacher observation journal to write down my thoughts as well as quotes from students. My methodology for each unit of study, every 2 weeks, there were specific 6 steps that I followed in teaching each specific unit. Presentation of vocabulary, reading the story, watching the video, comprehension of lyrics, receptive practice, and production or assessment. For each specific video, like the screenshot at the top from Tambien by Litquila and Agus Padilla, there was a presentation of vocabulary. For these specific words, I would tell students directly what they mean, or I'd have them guess the meaning on playing Quizlet Live with their classmates. They would read the story using screenshots from this story. The highlighted words would be the words that they had just learned, the newly presented vocabulary. They would read the story, and after we got done reading the story in the target language, checking for comprehension, they would watch the video. I would press play on the video. They would get to see the video from start to finish with no breaks or interruptions by me. After the video was over, the comprehension of the lyrics, I would hand each student a sheet with blanks. We would do a cloze activity, checking their understanding before and after once again. In the next days of class, they would have time for receptive practice, where they would be playing Quizlet Live once again, taking chunks of the story and filling in the blanks, doing pedagogical activities for the non-authentic group on Senior Woolly, or for the authentic group using lyricstraining.com to once again listen and fill in those blanks. For the 6th step of the teaching, production assessment. In wanting to get a grade for the gradebook, I just told students at the beginning of each unit that I would grade them on a writing assessment. I would have them create a version of the music video, tell me a version of the story that took place in the video, except with a twist, with a personal touch. For example, for this video, Las Excusas, instead of Emma giving 7 excuses to her Spanish teacher why she didn't complete her homework, I had students think, why would you not complete your homework? Why would your friend? What excuses are you giving to a teacher or other adult authority figure, so that they could have some room to be creative and interesting with their versions of that story. After that, the process would repeat 4 times over the 2 weeks using those top music videos, and the other ones 2 more in each group. For my quantitative measures of data collection, there were 8 Likert items with the pre-survey that were repeated in the identical post-survey, and the vocabulary skills knowledge post-test was repeated at the end. The pre-survey also contained 5 short answer questions for qualitative data, as well as the teacher observation journal, which was used for qualitative data. In my data analysis, I calculated the mean and mode score of each Likert scale item on the pre-test and the post-test in order to compare the control group and experimental group, as well as compare the pre-intervention scores of each group to the post-intervention scores of each group. On the vocabulary knowledge scale, I calculated the mean and median scores and used an unpaired t-test to see if there were significant statistical differences between the control and experimental groups. To answer question 1, for my results, what is the effect of music videos on vocabulary acquisition? This vocabulary knowledge skills test. This is what the sheet would look like that students received. We did this on paper. Rechazo would be one of those words. There were 10 words from each song, each music video, that were selected to be words that students had not previously encountered before in Spanish classes with me in Spanish 2 or in their Spanish 1 class. They could answer the first option for 1 point on my scale, not remembering having encountered this word before. If they remembered it but were unable to come up with what it means, 2 points. A guess of what it means, I think it means, would be worth 3 points out of 5. 4 points, I know this word, it means, if they were able to provide the definition, that was 4 out of 5. 5 points out of 5 on my system was, I can use this word in a sentence. If they can use this word in the target language, that is our goal. We're using this vocabulary in an integrated context. So, in total, the top score would be 200 points and the minimum score would be 400 points. Looking at the results, this is the distribution of scores from the non-authentic group, the vocabulary knowledge skills scores. There were 17 students whose scores counted. 2 students' scores were not counted because of time lived in Puerto Rico, and 1 student in this group whose scores were not counted because of being absent from class for the duration of the intervention. The mean score was 109.76, and the standard deviation was 22.97. That was for the non-authentic group. For the authentic group, here is the distribution of scores. There were 13 students, a little bit less than previously indicated. I had 4 students who were under COVID protocols at the end of the assessment, who had been under COVID protocols for about a month. I decided to not have them take the final assessment, and that means that I only had 13 students there. The mean score was 117, and the standard deviation was 22.72. The effect size was 0.315 with a p-value of 0.389, which was not found to be statistically significant. Moving on to question 2, what are students' perceptions of music video use in a Spanish language classroom to promote vocabulary acquisition? With these questions, asking about music videos from Spanish-speaking countries, music videos from Senior Woolley, I had both groups, both authentic and non-authentic, report on them before and after. As you can see, the pre-results, 4 out of 5, on a Likert scale of 1 being completely disagree and 5 being completely agree. These results were somewhat agree, completely agree, very positive results overall. And you can see that from pre-intervention to post-intervention, all of these scores either went up or held constant, that on this 5th question, all students completely agreed in the median score of working with music videos being a valuable use of class time. In the short answer questions, one of these questions was why, when I learn vocabulary in Spanish class, it's usually because. The most common answer for both groups was repetition. One student wrote, repetition is probably my best way to learn new words, which is a mirror image of what I wrote in my teacher observation journal. It is a good insight. This group, authentic group, stayed about the same pre and post test, where the non-authentic group, 12 of them mentioned repetition in their answers with the pre-test. However, by the post-test, it was not the most common answer. 8 of them mentioned music videos as being the usual way of them learning vocabulary in Spanish class. Moving on to question 3, with authentic music versus non-authentic music. Talking about the type of music used in the study. The authentic group, when we were working with music from Spanish-speaking countries, they mentioned positive feelings, feeling happy, feeling excited. 14 of them in the pre-survey and 14 of them in the post-survey. The group that's working with non-authentic music also had overwhelmingly positive feelings. 12 of them in the pre-survey with a little jump to 15 in the post-survey. One student that I think is worth mentioning in this authentic group, who was not part of the 14, she reported feeling tired when working with videos from Spanish-speaking countries. However, by the post-survey, her answer had changed from tired to excited. With survey question 13, asking about the favorite music video that you have seen in Spanish class. Although the non-authentic group was split down the middle for most of them, with the authentic group, students remembered from last March before the COVID shutdown that they had seen a non-authentic song from Senior Woolley, Diego y sus amigos. 13 students, 11 of the 13 were identifying that specific song that they remembered from last March, where only 3 talked about the authentic song Puebla by Alvaro Soler that they had seen on the first day of class this year. I just want to emphasize that all students had seen both authentic and non-authentic music videos in Spanish class last year, the beginning of Spanish class this year, like I said, so they would have a some kind of frame of reference for this, but I think it's worth noting that at the end, this authentic group completely changed to authentic songs, with all these 11 students mentioning the specific songs that were used in the intervention, which were familiar songs that they had just learned about. As a summary of the findings on question 1, there was evidence of growth from the vocabulary knowledge skills test, but not a significant difference between groups. I did see the evidence that students had learned. I did not do a pre-test for the vocabulary knowledge skills test because I was advised by Professor Batchelor that it could influence students to study specific words from the test, to only focus on them during the intervention. I wanted to see more what students picked up without the threat of assessment. This writing fluency was another way that I saw how students were learning, the retelling versions of the story. Many times I saw students use vocabulary from the specific music videos, the pop songs, and these vocabulary words that they used were used with varying degrees of success. At times, students were perfectly able to take lyrics from the song and translate them to their own writing. For example, seré guapo de nuevo changed to seré feliz de nuevo. I will be handsome again to I will be happy again, pretty easily for the students in the non-authentic group. However, the students in the authentic group struggled a lot more with one of the songs, Cásate conmigo, incorporating the command. I know one student wrote, Mi amiga, cásate conmigo con su novio. My friend, marry me with her boyfriend. However, I see that as evidence of an underlying system developing, connecting what is on the page, Cásate conmigo, with the lexical knowledge that that's something about marrying, even if they were unable to get the exact ending correct. On question 2, all questions saw improvement in the median score from the pre to post survey, even the type of music video not used with their respective group. This means that the students who are using music videos made in Illinois after the intervention had more positive feelings about music videos from Spanish-speaking countries and were more open to learning vocabulary through music videos from Spanish-speaking countries. This corresponds with the findings of Yelbe, who all 56 participants in her study, whether they were talking about music played before class or without words, or they were talking about analyzing the lyrics of pop songs, all students had this positive feeling. On question 3, I also experienced uniform positive feelings, enthusiasm for music videos, and the stories that came with them, which corresponds to the Slovak University students in the 2019 study by Sanchez Vizcaíno and Mora. There are some limitations, however, with my survey. It is a small sample size. With 41 total participants, some of them limited by their previous knowledge on the vocabulary knowledge skills test, and others that were limited by the COVID protocols that were in place. There's also a lack of a true control group for this study. In designing the study last summer, I designed it for 3 Spanish classes, which I mistakenly believed that I was teaching. I designed for an authentic group and a non-authentic group, as well as a control group not receiving instruction through music. However, in August, I realized I was only teaching 2 classes and I had to make the adaptation to eliminate this control group. As far as some recommendations for other Spanish teachers, I would recommend them to use music videos with their students. They invoke positive feelings and they can foster unique connections. I know that I had a student who almost no days of class was excited about our classroom learning, but when I played the authentic music, she asked me who the artist was. She wanted to talk about that because she knew the song. They also can foster unique connections. In one specific day of this non-authentic music class, I had a student who came back from lunch telling me that she was listening to this song in her car, Feo, specifically by Senor Woolley, the non-authentic song. Later on in the class, 20 minutes later, students were working quietly and 3 of them spontaneously started to sing this song. As well as another student who at the end of class told me about that same song. She needed to come up and tell me that this song was her favorite song. Just the warning for other teachers. I used pre-teaching vocabulary activities, storytelling, reading and creating parallel narratives, lyric comprehension checks, receptive vocabulary practice, information gap games, formative summative assessments. It was not just pressing play on the latest video popped up on YouTube. All solid pedagogical practices were obviously used for this, and I would definitely recommend teachers to stick with that. It would be interesting for future studies to see if students at different ability levels have similar or different perceptions. My students were at the intermediate level, intermediate low, and intermediate mid, according to ACTFL. It would be interesting to see if novice students had the same perception or advanced students as well. And one caveat at the end, The difficulty of use. It is difficult to rely on musical artists to release new material, as well as the teachers who adapt this material, make sound pedagogical activities with this material. It's more reliance on the artist releasing something than I would particularly like. You cannot force that. Also, changing musical tastes. A song that was great in the pop music scene 7 years ago that students loved, that sounded like their favorite songs, is going to change more than other curriculum. And that is my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Thank you.